views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk, the courageous men and women of the NYPD, the people who protect us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, may be more vulnerable and under more pressure than many people realize. In fact, suicides among police officers are up this year. While the Riverdale Press reported that there are usually 4 or 5 NYPD suicides each year, this year in the month of June alone, there were 4, totaling 6 for 2019 so far in New York City. The most recent was an officer from the 50th Precinct in the borough of the Bronx. Tonight we try to provide some understanding of this horrible trend. We'll take a look at the pressures on police officers, what might lead them to take their own lives, how these terrible incidents can be prevented, and also maybe provide some resources for police officers or really anyone who feels surrounded and feels like the world is closing in on them. Please join me in welcoming back to BronxTalk a former NYPD lieutenant, Pace University professor, and frequent network news commentator on criminal justice issues, our friend Darrin Porcher. Nice to have you, Dr. Porcher.
Always my pleasure, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Also the executive director of Mosaic Mental Health, formerly the Riverdale Mental Health Association, Dr. Donna Demetri Friedman. Nice to have you.
Thank you.
Dr. Porcher, talk to me a little bit about what it's like to be a police officer and what kinds of pressures could contribute to a police officer, and we'll say Officer Priest was highly respected, seems to have a lovely, comfortable Long Island family, and out of the blue literally just took a gun and took his life. What contributes to that?
Well, I look back at my experience as a practitioner in the NYPD, and oftentimes people look to police officers as experts in all genres. When you deal with something like a domestic dispute, and then you leave the domestic dispute, and then you deal with a person, a young child that was shot and killed, and then you revert to something as simple as a vehicle accident with no injuries.
Could be the same day.
It could be all in the same day. What happens, your psyche is on an emotional roller coaster, and everyone looks to you as that point of strength. But we're human beings. Police officers are human, and they have, in some way, shape, or form, they need a way to vent or release that tension that they're dealing with on a day-to-day. And this is somewhat reflective of what happens with people that serve in military service. So we look at police officers, in essence, they're a microcosm of society, and they need a release. Now, the key to it is you being able to channel that release with a qualified professional. So I give you an example of what they have in the NYPD. They have a division referred to as the medical division, but within that medical division, you have the psych services unit, psychological services. And in the psychological services unit, you have a team of trauma counselors and qualified therapists. And in addition to that, if an officer is uncomfortable dealing with the resources that are within the NYPD's framework, you can also reach outside of the NYPD to organizations such as PAPA, or they have different,
So there's something out there.
Right,
for
exactly.
them.
There are a multitude of different agencies that exist outside of the
So
department.
then how does somebody slip through? I mean, the way you've painted it is very difficult job, very challenging job. Things can affect you. There are resources. How does somebody fall through?
Quite simple. We're used to, as police officers, we're used to being that structure of strength. And people don't want to expose a level of weakness. And so oftentimes when you're speaking with your peers or people outside of that framework, officers generally want to maintain that position of strength. But like I mentioned a second ago, you need that release. And people, it's very difficult to make that assessment as to someone is in need of help. I mean, granted, we have the blaring examples, such as a person that's just spending all of their money, a person is going through emotional stress. Those things are really easy to diagnose and assess. But the more difficult instances are those people that hold things in.
Which could be, and I make no judgments, could be something that might have happened to that police officer. I think about police officers that I see, and when something happens in the street, and they say, hey, somebody ran by with a gun, or whatever it is, what's the first thing you do? You say you call a cop. And then here's a police officer who may or may not be a family person, man or woman, who comes in and then sees a child who got shot. Is there a way to divorce yourself and kind of, protect yourself from that emotional moment of knowing, hey, I have kids, I have a family, I care about people, that's why I got this job in the first place, and yet I'm looking at just the most horrible scene I've ever seen. I mean, is there a way to train a police officer to divorce themselves from being affected?
Well, counseling, I believe, would be the sustainment piece. It should be an ongoing process. Right, whereas I think officers should meet with a therapist maybe once to twice a year just to assess where that individual is. But the problem is we have the labor issues, whereas if an officer is perceived as unfit, then the labor unions would then interdict and say, hey, look, this is unfair. The officer's being unnecessarily criticized, right, and they're being taken offline. It's a tough stretch.
Let's bring Dr. Friedman into the conversation. Clearly, people under immense pressure. I guess it would be akin on some level to seeing soldiers who come back with PTSD and they have lingering dreams and issues. How do you deal with it? Before we even get to the suicide piece, how do you deal and what is the appropriate way to address people who go through these things literally on a daily basis?
So I think that you have to look at it from both a macro and a micro level. I think the macro level is probably the most important piece, and that is until we really tackle the idea that needing to talk to someone after witnessing something as horrific as a murder of a child is normal. To need to speak to them, that's normal. To not be given the opportunity to do that is actually not a normal thing. And so, I applaud you for having us here because it gives me an opportunity to let people know that actually I would be concerned about you if you didn't have a reaction.
To talk to or have
a reaction. And so what I would love to see, and we would certainly be happy to partner and facilitate helping partner other community agencies, it has to be embedded in the system. Having folks in the precinct is great, but there's still such a stigma because when you use the word weakness, if you see that phenomena as weakness, then
a perceived weakness.
Yes, then you're not going to seek the help. And so we have to reframe it. It's actually healthy to have a reaction to something that's so horrific. And then to get that support, you can go back out there and try to prevent it.
What you say, I never occurred to me. And so if God forbid I or you or anybody I know or was close to witnessed something like that, when after they called the police,
yeah,
and then they came out of it, you would hug that person and you would look at that person and you would say, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry you had to see that. It's just a horrible thing. Do you need some help? Do you want to have a drink? Do you want to go have a dinner? Do you want to talk to somebody? And you would deal with it. But a police officer will see that, and as Dr. Porcher said, that police officer will go to 3 different events in the same day, one after the other, and potentially it'll be just part of the job and nobody will address that. Right?
And so one of the other ways...
It never occurred to me that that's where we were going. Fascinating.
One of the other ways to sort of support the police force, is to involve the families.
Their families.
Their families. No one is more invested in the wellness of those officers than the spouse and the extended family.
Wow.
And so one of the ways to approach this is to engage on a community level the families of those folks and provide supports to them. What does it look like? Is he waking up and having nightmares? Is he, you know, is she not eating the way she did? You know, things that are little triggers, little clues that there's something else going on.
I'm going to bounce this off Dr. Porcher in a second. You know, when you think about what police officers do and what they have to go through every single day, and you know, one of the things is goodness, I love police officers. They're proud people. They do this job, and they know they are the rock for the community.
That's right.
And what I, frankly, in some of the research I did, many of them literally don't want to bring that home. They don't want to talk to their wife or their children or say, goodness, I saw this horrible thing. A guy overdosed right in front of me. I tried to save him. I couldn't save him. I mean, these things go on every day, and they don't want to bring it home. What you're suggesting is maybe they ought to bring it home, or find, even if they don't want to disrupt the family dinner, find a moment to talk to a loved one about it.
That's right. And also
wow.
then to give them the support
eye-opening
and the
for me.
tools. The other thing that we're finding that's really been groundbreaking in the mental health field is using peer supports. And what that means is folks who have a lived experience. So other cops who have been through traumatic events,
Right.
who are older, who are experienced, who've figured out a way to get around that stigma, to get around that, and to, you know, if one of the guys or one of the women on the force is coming to you and saying, hey, I heard you went through something horrible this morning. I mean, we do
Wow.
this. If there's a suicide on our staff, I'm the executive director. I meet every week with that staff member until I feel like they're okay.
This is fascinating stuff.
Right.
for
Well,
you.
just to piggyback on what she mentioned, they do have peer support groups.
Right, I was gonna
within
mention
the
there is
NYPD,
peer-to-peer
right.
counseling.
One of those groups is PAPA, and what that does is they bring together officers. It's a hotline that you reach out to and say, hey, look, I'm experiencing a level of stress, and you'll have an actual active officer that will sit down with you and just try to talk you through the situation. But it goes back to, it's not just on-the-job issues. And as I mentioned earlier, police are a microcosm of society. Police officers deal with financial stress, marital issues, things to that effect, that affect them just the same way that anyone else would, in any way that someone else would be affected. So it's not just the police side of it, but it's the human perspective that we want to work on. And I'm a strong proponent in officers should meet with a therapist twice a year, because I think with that assessment...
Do they do that? Is that part of the
No, they
system?
don't. It's not a requirement. Because in
She's,
many
I'm
instances...
sure, going to nod yes to that.
Well, because in
I
many
think that's
instances...
too little.
Right, in many instances, an officer will become somewhat ostracized, because we have something we refer to as modified assignment. If you're deemed as unfit, what the department will do is they'll remove your gun, shield, and ID card because you can be a potential threat to yourself. Officers don't want to be placed in that particular
Right, it's
box.
stigmatized.
So, right, it goes back to it being a catch-22 situation. But that being said, how do officers compartmentalize what they're going through? It's a slippery slope, and it's not a one fixed solution.
Let me ask you about taking the work home. I mean, you know, I know even in my own work, you know, it's like we don't want to hear about your show anymore. You know, did you find that you there were times you said, you know what, I'm not bringing this home. I'm not talking to my family about it because it's too horrible. It's just, you know, I want to separate, compartmentalize, to use your word.
That didn't happen. That really doesn't happen as much as people think.
Really?
I think it's more of a comprehensive overload. It's not just like, okay, this happened to me today and I'm just really traumatized. I think when you look at it over the long
time.
scale, right, that's when the officer is kind of weighed down with this. And I'll give you an example. Stephen Silks recently committed suicide, Deputy Chief Silks out of Queens. I worked for him, and he was a person that loved the police department. He was coming up on mandatory retirement. This was it for him. So he just couldn't fathom going into civilian life. And I genuinely believe that it was just that transition from being an officer into civilian life. He had no kids. He wasn't married. And it's a tremendous shift going from one to the other. And I give you another example, like in the military, Oftentimes, when generals are retiring, they have to go through a psychological process so they can gain an understanding that, look, you no longer wear,
detox in a
right,
way,
you're
yeah.
no longer wearing the stars on your shoulder in civilian life. You're going to be waiting online like everyone else, and if you have to call for assistance, you're just another person. So that can be something that people struggle with. That's why I mentioned the Stephen Silk suicide recently.
You know, you mentioned it, and this is going to sound funny, and I don't mean it funny, but, you know, after you talk about somebody you worked with who committed suicide, and it fits right in, do you need a hug? I mean, you know, for you, you saw somebody you worked with committed suicide. You know, Darrin, you've been my friend a long time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
God bless you, and I'm sure it affected you, right?
It did, but he's not the only person that I knew personally that committed suicide. I can run off probably 10 people that I knew in my 20-year career that committed suicide, both at work and at home. I mean, I've been at work before, and I remember once there was a situation when I was an instructor in a police academy, one of the instructors stepped behind the curtain on the stage in full view of all of the recruits and in an auditorium and shot himself in the head and killed himself.
I know you appreciated what I interjected there,
Yes,
and somewhat
I
humorously,
know.
but I
No,
you know how I meant
no.
it, right?
You know, one of the things that I'm hearing is that there's a need for prevention and anticipation. So, and it's interesting because I have some friends who are baseball players, professional baseball players, and I've talked to them about, you know, when you retire, you know, that sort of transition is so profound that people get depressed, they struggle, they use substances. So as a society, we are not listening to the mental health professionals who know there's decades and decades of research around when are the times in life where you're going to be potentially susceptible to suicidality or depression. And retiring is one of them. And whether or not you have social support is a risk factor. So you know, when we think about police and what they go through and what they face, I mean, as a clinician, you sit and you listen to people all day long talk about traumatic things. How do we deal with it?
That's right. Do you need a hug?
We get supervision. It's embedded in our profession because it is necessary. When a new clinician is hired right out of graduate school, they get 4 weeks vacation. No other profession gives you that much vacation. You know why? You need it. You need to be.
Well, teachers do. Teachers
Well,
can
yes,
get,
and it's a
they need
similar,
it.
exactly. So this idea of getting in there and anticipating when someone's retiring, anticipating when someone's been through something.
I want to ask, I'm going to start with you, and then I'll give Dr. Porcher a chance to mention the same thing. Dr. Friedman, do you have a sense of why now? In other words, is there any way to look at whatever's going on in our society now that would, because the trend is upward right now. I mean, in other words, we didn't do a show on police suicides a year ago because, you know, it was a problem, but now we're trending upward noticeably.
So I can only, I'm a researcher, so I don't like to guess.
I mean, there were 100 in the United States this year.
But I
That's
would
a lot.
say that it reminds me, sadly, of I'm old enough to remember people coming back from the Vietnam War. We did not treat our veterans with the respect and dignity that they deserved. And I think that there is a very complex matrix of issues going on in our society right now in relation to people's attitudes toward the police, and that may contribute on some level. I also think that there is an economic disparity in our society that's vast, and so if you are somebody who's working hard to put food on the table and you haven't financially, I think we are seeing both in the business world that there's a financial pressure.
As Dr. Porcher said, they're seeing the same pressures that everybody else is seeing, but it's compounded with all these other. Let me ask you a connected question. There's a lot of pressure right now to make the collar, to come up with the numbers and all that. So, you know, an officer who's done a really good job and then says, you know what, there's nothing I can do that makes anybody happy. I got to arrest more people. You know what I mean? Is that a component here that would answer maybe why now?
Well, quantitative policing is something that evolved from CompStat, and you have officers that are driven towards quotas, so to speak. I mean,
Right.
the
That's what I
department
was
will say,
suggesting,
yeah,
yeah.
look, we don't have quotas, but I'll tell you there are quotas in play. So could that push someone to a suicide? Not so much as a lower level officer, but possibly a commander. A police commander is someone that's going to be held under the gun in terms of quantitative statistics. Are you effectively reducing crime? But that's more of an aberration than it is the norm. The truth of the matter is, each person has a different psyche. We're all wired differently. And what impacts me may not impact her. And it goes back to police officers always deemed as this pillar of strength. They're dealing with situations that we deem them as being impervious to. You walk in, there's a dead body, okay, that's the end of it. The gross majority of suicides don't evolve around things that are happening at work. I mean, granted, if you have a situation where a guy gets in trouble and he's going to jail, of course, that could possibly impact his mindset. But the truth of the matter is, there are so many other directions, so many other angles that this is coming from. But what happens with the department, the stress that you endure as a member of the department for 10, 15 years, that multiplies your emotions when you're dealing with a situation like, let's say, a financial issue, something to that effect. This is all now coming together and weighing you down.
Let's turn you into the police commissioner, and you've seen this problem, you see this going on. They have, you call it the PAPA program. There is peer-to-peer counseling. You talked about, Dr. Friedman wants to see more, counseling than twice a year. What would you do right now to say, we got a little bit of a trend here? Is it a matter of internal within the precinct they got to deal with it? Is it a matter of looking with individual police officers? What would you recommend? You've been in a police car. You know what it's like there. What would help?
I think the mandatory assessments are of optimum importance. In the police department, we don't have mandatory assessments, as I mentioned to you, because the unions would fight this tooth and nail. But we need to have these mandatory assessments by professionals that actually sit down with an officer and just say, hey, how's it going? See where this person is. Like I said, I said twice a year. She says it could be more. That's possible. I tend to lend my credence to her being the subject matter expert as a psychologist. But the truth of the matter is, we need to have a more astringent scheduling in officers sitting down to conduct these assessments to determine where an individual is.
Because we don't know where that, unlike diagnosing an illness of some kind. When
we only step in when there's something wrong.
That's
we
right.
never step in when things are going status quo.
And, again, Kevin Priest, may he rest in peace. He was 3 days away from his 25th anniversary. He was going to retire next year, allegedly, at least according to the press reports. He told people what he was going to do when he retired. I mean, God bless him for eternity. Something was in there, and I make no judgments from this distance. You want to get to that germ. You want to get a professional to identify it.
Right, and it's of optimum importance that we have a third party to conduct the assessment. Because like I mentioned earlier, and like my counterpart mentioned, many times officers may feel a sense of being ostracized when they come forward for help.
Right.
But when we have that outside entity that steps in, and it's held from in a place of confidentiality, I think that helps.
Right. And what you said also earlier, I can fully understand. A proud, brave, courageous police officer, and they're going to take your firearm away because they think, you got something in your head. That also is a problem,
One of the things is when you remove an officer's firearm, you remove the gross majority of what the duties and responsibilities are. The officer can no longer require overtime. The officer can no longer transfer
also
to
a symbol of
an
power
assignment
and all
of
that.
choice.
I'm going to ask you then the same question. I guess you would agree that more assessments are necessary. Is there anything else in there that you would want to bring up?
I'm an educator as well as a clinician, and so I would say that starting very early on in all sort of phases of life, and particularly when people are starting to train, not to dissuade people from going into this profession, but to educate people on what it is that they're going to be doing and how they can get the support they need, and to have, I mean, this happened after 9/11. It really took senior folks coming forward in the fire department, the police department, to say, hey, look, this was traumatizing for all of us. Let's all band together, and the family that we are, and help one another. And for some reason, because it was a universal tragedy, there was an acceptance of that. Once everything got back to normal, people sort of went back to their stoicism. There's a shame. There's a shame in coming forward.
It's ironic that you say that, because next week we are going to talk about 9/11 survivors and all that. But I just want to give you an opportunity to talk about Mosaic mental health.
Sure.
And so, I mean, because this suicide prevention and all these other things, but mental health just needs so much more attention in our society in general. So I'll give you a minute here
Yes.
to just roll through what you do.
Great.
And also, there are phone numbers for suicide prevention that we can put up on the screen. You know, whatever it is, please get help. There are people, and if you need to go through us, I'll help confidentially get you to who you need to. Go ahead.
Yes. So Mosaic Mental Health, formerly Riverdale Mental Health, is located in the Northwest Bronx. We serve the Bronx, southern Westchester, northern Manhattan. We've been around for 60 years. We just celebrated our 60th anniversary. I've been there for 26 years. Started out as an intern and have watched the organization grow. We provide services cradle to grave. We do housing, we do substance use disorder treatment, we do vocational services. We have something called a short-term crisis respite. If you need to be stabilized and you don't want to go to the hospital, we can have you come and stay with us for 7 days and help you get back on track. We did see a trend in increased suicidality, and we did a program that was supported by the New York City Department of Mental Health and Hygiene to heighten our awareness on how clinicians can identify who's at risk, how to intervene, and we encourage everybody, if you think someone's at risk, don't take the risk of not acting.
Or not saying something or finding professional people.
It's really important.
You didn't fully say it, but I'm going to say we never put enough resources into mental health care, and now more than ever, you see it with police suicides, you see it with opioid use. We need more and more. That's my advocacy. I'm allowed to say it. It's my show. We need more and more funding for mental health resources. Dr. Darrin Porcher, thank you for your service as a police officer and everything else you do.
Thank you for your service
As the biggest mouth in the Bronx. Listen, we'll all agree, we love our police officers. We need our police officers, and we want them to stay healthy physically and mentally as well. That's most important. Thank you so much. Folks, if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the borough of the Bronx, then email them to us at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org. You can send a tweet at BronxTalk, post them on our Facebook page. As I said, next week we take a look at the heroes of 9/11 and the controversy over aftercare resources for them. We'll have a couple of firefighters who were first responders on that fateful day, and they'll be here to talk about their experience and some of their advocacy. We thank our producer is Helen Greenberg. Our directors are William Guzman and Nick Marrero. And yes, we will see you next week. Good night.